Hello students, welcome to lecture 2 of basic to advanced level programming. In this video, we'll be discussing about variables and data types which are really important as we enhance into our coding. So in previous lecture, I have discussed about flowcharts and how to approach a problem. And I hope all of you are done with your assignment task because it is really important concept as we move further. So in this video, we'll be talking about few important data types and getting some practical exposure through Jupyter Notebook. So let's get into the video. Here, variables are used to access the data which we are using. Without variables, we cannot access the data. So let me take an example. I'm taking data as 50, and I'm assigning it to a variable called as num. So I'm taking num as my variable. I'm assigning a number 50. So here in previous video I've discussed one concept called as double equal sign and single equal sign. If I mention double equals instead of single equals over here, it becomes a condition check. So here it checks for condition if the num is it equal to number 50. It returns true or false condition, but I don't want to check for any condition. I want to assign a value just like I discussed in previous video. So here that is the reason why I am using a single equal sign. It indicates the assignment of value which is present on the right hand side to the variable on the left hand side. So later on, if I want to get the result of the number, I can just put number. If I put num, I'll get output as 50. So here we are done. The most exciting part over here in Python programming language is that in other programming languages, we don't have any choice of assigning whichever data type we want to assign to a variable. We cannot change the data which we are assigned once. But in Python programming language, we can change that data. For example, previously I have mentioned num as 50. Now I don't want my num to be 50. I want it to be alphabetical 50. So now I'm making my num equals 50. This I have to mention in quotation marks, either double quotation marks or single quotation marks. Got it? So here I got this facility or feature of changing the data type which I have assigned previously to other data type. But in different languages other than Python, this is not available. Here, the data which we are assigning to the value num can be redefined furtherly, but in other programming languages, it cannot be redefined. I hope you are getting it. And one more interesting part over here is, for example, I am considering a number 50. So here we don't have any limit in order to assign the values to a variable. But in other programming languages, we have their limit. So particular data type can occupy this amount of space in memory. So we have some restrictions in other programming languages like 4 bytes, 2 bytes, something like this. But here in Python we can assign the value as much as we can until this entire space of the device on which we are working. So it is not restricted to a particular what I can say is, it is not restricted to a particular amount of space which it's going to occupy. Here the space can be varied. And one more important thing which we have to discuss is, we have different types of data types. Say we have, okay, we have integer data type which takes numbers, numerical values and all. We have float. Integer indicates 1, 2, 3 and so on. Whereas floating point indicates 1.0, 1.1 and so on. So we have decimal point numbers. Then we have strings. Strings and characters are a kind similar. I can say if we are choosing a single alphabet, then it is called as a character. Whereas if we are taking group of alphabets together, then it is called as a string. These strings and characters are mentioned either in double quotation marks or single quotation marks. Now let's get practical exposure of all the data types and the variables from Jupyter Notebook. This is Jupyter Notebook. You can access this Jupyter Notebook by downloading Anaconda Navigator. I will mention the link of Anaconda Navigator in the description, so you can download it from there. And I have opened Jupyter Notebook and created a new folder named Basic to Advanced. And in this, I have created a new Python notebook from here, variables and data types. This I can mention as markdown, which means the heading. Then if I do alt enter, I will shift to next cell. Let us create a variable named num and assign value 50. Let us check the type of data which we are assigning to the variable num. We have a built-in function called as type in order to check the type of data. So type of that variable, I'm going to print this. We have one more built-in function called print in order to get the output. The data which is assigned to the variable num is an integer. Okay, let's move on to next. Now I'm taking a value a as 50, b as 10. If I do a equals b, it checks for condition. If a value is it equal to b, if it is equal, it returns true. If it is not equal, it returns false. So let us check this out by printing the condition. It is giving false because 50 is not equal to 10. Let's do one thing. Let's make it 50 again. So now let us check. Now we have to get output as true. Yeah, we got it true. So I'm taking one more example. I'm taking num as 50. As I mentioned earlier, we can reassign different values to a single variable. So I'm taking num as age. Now let us print the number. So what could be the output? Give it a guess. Is it 50 or age? Let us check it out. It is age. Here in Python, whatever line of code we are writing, it goes line by line. The print statement takes the newly assigned value, not the previous one. Here the data is not fixed, it can be variable. So we must be a little cautious whenever we are assigning variables to values. Okay, so we have one more thing here. Let us check the type of the data over here, and even here let us check the type of data. Here let's also print the number. Okay, so as per our guess, the answer should be first 50, then the type must be an integer, then the answer must be age, and type must be a string. So yes, 50 integer age string. Yes, we are good to go. Then we have one more thing. We can assign as much big number as we want. So there is no restriction. So if I print number, I'm going to get the number. But in other programming languages, this is not possible. Only restricted amount of data is to be entered, and whenever you mention the data type of that particular variable, you have to assign only that data belonging to that data type. Here, since we are not assigning any particular data type to the variable, we can reassign that variable with different data type. It is up to the programmer whether he want to assign that particular data type, or if at all he wants to change in future. The most important thing over here is we must be careful while we are reassigning the values. That is the only thing. Let us take an example over here. I'm taking a as 10, I'm taking b as 10.1. So I want to print the type of a along with the type of b. So what could be the output? Is type of A and B is same. Let us understand over here. So the type of A is an integer, whereas the type of B is floating point value. So if we have a decimal point, then it is called as floating point number. If we doesn't have any decimal point, then it is called as an integer. Here we have taken a variable named alpha and assign value ABC, and if we check the type, it is a string. So these are all some of the most important data types, and this is how we are going to assign a variable to any data type. These variables are basically used to access the data from the memory. So whenever we want to access the data 50, or say age, or whatever it is in future coding lectures, we need something to retrieve the data, means to get the data from the memory. So we'll be using something called variable. These variables are used to get the data from the memory. I hope you are understanding what it is. One of the most important thing which we have to discuss in Python programming is that the variables which we are using in order to assign the values are not usually storing the values. They are storing the location or the address of the data where it is being stored. So that is the reason why we are able to reassign the values with different data type, because it is just storing the location, not the actual data. There is one more case. If at all we want to store same data with different variable name, then new data location is not created. This new variable will be assigned to the location of the data which is already present, so that new data is not generated. But if we are creating the same variable with different data type, then that variable is being located or pointing to the location of the data which we are assigned. So whenever we are trying to print the new data or the variable, we are unable to retrieve the initial data in the previous example which we have discussed. It is because it is not locating to the location of that previous data. Now it is allocated to new location. That is the reason why it is giving the output as new data. Just give it a try by yourself. Download a Jupyter notebook and try doing some rough examples of assigning values to a variable. Try with different kinds of data types so that you get better understanding. In next lecture we'll be moving more deep into concepts, so I hope you got a better grip of this. Until the next video, that is all from my end. Until then, enjoy learning.